we've talked about this before if you've been in these Citizen Advocate Academy sessions, but I want to hear from you. Why do we vote? Why is it worth our time and effort? Yeah. You pick people who represent you and your values, right? If you want better healthcare, if you want more healthcare, let's vote for someone who has that, who has those priorities too. Yeah, those are some great reasons why we vote. And there are so many reasons, right? Like I could sit here and list off reasons to vote all day and all night, you know.
Yep.
It's a huge privilege to be able to vote. We are very lucky that we're able to represent the people who elect us. I think it's great and very empowering to vote in people who represent us, but also to vote out people who don't represent us. So if you don't like the person who is, you know, serving for your district in the state legislature, or if you don't like the governor, if you don't like the president, you have the power to help vote them out of office and to get them out of there. And so there are a lot of things that your vote can do. And it's important to remember that the elections that you're voting for, it's not just the presidential election, though that's the one that I'm sure everybody's talking about this year, right? But you guys see firsthand how big of an impact it makes about who we talk to at the Minnesota State Legislature, the people who are in those rooms and who are in those committees and who Zach and Jeff and I run around trying to talk to all day, right? You guys are the ones who elect them, you know? And so it's important to know that your voice has an impact at the courts, at the Minnesota Capitol, at the federal Capitol in DC, you know, at the White House. You can vote in all of these races and have a huge impact. And it's important that you are voting and also that you bring along those around you. So if you know how to vote and you have the tools to vote and register to vote, you can help bring people in your community along with you, right? So you're almost like an ambassador. You can help share that information and spread it so that overall the disability community, the brain injury community, I mean, whatever other communities that you're a part of are brought along for the ride. Because ultimately, the more people who vote and the more people who are engaged in this process, the better the representation we're going to have. And so it's really important that we vote and that we bring those with us around too. So the big question then is the logistical question. How the heck do we vote? And that's tougher this year than it has been in the past, unfortunately. You know, with COVID, polling places aren't necessarily the safest place to be, you know, especially if you have existing health conditions. But fortunately in Minnesota, we have a great system of no excuse absentee ballots. That's basically vote by mail. They just have a fancy way of saying it. And so you don't need any excuse to vote by mail. You can just sign up. And it's super nice because it gets sent to your house. You can fill it out at home and then mail it right back, and you don't have to leave your apartment or your house or your room even. So we're going to talk through today, and the main focus of what we're going to do right now is talking through those logistics. So how do you vote and how do you register? So to start out, the big question is who can vote? I'm going to quick quiz you. If you have your binder, you can maybe cheat a little bit, but that's okay. Who can vote in Minnesota? Do y'all know?
U.S. citizens.
Yep, a U.S. citizen. That's our first one.
18.
Over 18.
Yep, over 18 on election day. So you have a specific day.
A non-felon.
Yeah, non-felon.
Yeah.
Resident of Minnesota.
Yep, and a resident of Minnesota. Perfect, you guys. You're doing great. I think you're very smart or know how to use your resources well.
Oh yeah.
The one thing that's really important to note, and this a lot of people don't worry about it, but in the disability community especially, a lot of people who are under guardianship think that they cannot vote, but actually you can vote while under guardianship unless a judge specifically revokes that right.
Yeah.
So unless someone has explicitly told you that you cannot vote, you can vote even if you are under guardianship. And that's a little difficult to understand, but that has big impacts in the disability community because people think that they can't vote, but they can. And so it's important that we clarify that and make sure that everyone who can vote knows that they are able to vote. And the only other thing on here is that if a court has ruled that you can't vote, they do that sometimes, then you can't vote. But for the most part, unless you've been explicitly told that you cannot vote, if you have all of the things that these check marks list, you know, you're a US citizen, you're over 18 years old on the election day, you've lived in Minnesota for 20 days, you're done with your felony, if you have a felony, then you can vote and you can express these awesome rights. So, are you registered to vote? I'm hoping most of you will say yes, just because you've been around long enough. But especially if you're working with people who maybe haven't voted a lot in the past, one thing you should be sure to check is if you are registered to vote. And, you know, we're really lucky here in Minnesota to have a great kind of home base page where all of this information is stored. And that's this link you see right here, mnvotes.org. And this is on page 41 of your binder. But that page has a bunch of amazing links where you can check a bunch of this information, including whether you are registered to vote or not. It'll, you know, if you're online, it'll pull up, you know, some boxes where you can fill out your information, and it will tell you if you are currently registered and if you're registered at your current address. Because sometimes it gets really difficult when you move. You can't remember whether you registered at your new address or whether you're at your old one. So it's good to just be able to check at home online. And so this is one of the things we can check during our activity at the end of this training. If you don't know if you're registered, that's a great question to ask, and we can walk through with you and check and see. We can check and see today. And if you're not registered, then it's really easy to register online. So if you are registered, congrats, you did it. But if you're not registered yet, it's not the end of the world, because guess what? We can register you whenever, right? You can register online at the same website. If you're more comfortable with paper, you can register on a paper form that you print out, or that, you know, we can send to you if you want, and you mail it in. Or you can register at the polls on election day. The only thing you have to remember about that, if you're registering at the polls, is that you do need to have some documents showing that you live where you currently live. And usually what they recommend is some sort of like electric bill or utility bill. But there are lots of options for you to register, so you not being registered is not a good excuse not to vote. And also having this information will help you make sure that you, your family, and all your friends are registered, right? You can go around and check. You can go around and get people registered. That's an awesome way to be involved. And if they're not, you can give them the tools to get registered, right? It's not too hard here in Minnesota. You can do it online, you can do the paper form, and you can do it the day of at the polls. So the next question is, how do you vote? Right? If you're registered, if you're good to go, if you have all your paperwork ready to go, how do you vote at the end of the day? And we're really lucky. There are a couple of things you can do. The first, and the one you've probably done before, is you can vote at the polls. And so each, you know, where you live will have a specific precinct location where you can go in and cast your ballot on the day of the election, which, you know, for this upcoming one is November 3rd. I think we all have that deeply ingrained in our brains. But unfortunately, because of COVID, you know, at least here at the Minnesota Brain Injury Alliance, we would really encourage you to vote absentee or mail-in over voting at the polls. So that's not to say that you can't vote at the polls at all.
Yep. But
if you are going to vote and you want to not touch anyone, if you want to not, you know, touch pens that other people have touched, or come in contact with people who you don't know, a really, really good option and a safer option is absentee ballots or mail-in voting. And so like I mentioned earlier, Minnesota has no excuse absentee voting, which means you don't need a reason to do it. You can vote absentee just 'cause.
Cool.
And you can do that every year, not even just during COVID. You can just vote by mail if that's easier for you. And so we're going to walk through some of the details about that. If that's not a good option for you, because it isn't a great option for everyone, there's also early voting locations where you can go cast your ballot before election day, so before November 3rd. It's a little tricky to figure out when and where those are, but Zach, Jeff, and I are happy to help figure that out for you if you'd like to vote in person but don't want to go the same day that everybody else is going. So that's another really good option to go cast your ballot.
Nice.
So this is kind of what I've been saying this whole time. With COVID, there are a lot of concerns about the safety of polling places and the impact that COVID will have on our elections. I think a lot of people are worried about this. It is being strongly recommended that Minnesotans vote absentee. You can vote absentee for any reason you want to.
Yes.
And the big thing you have to think about is that you need to mail in your ballot before election day.
Oh, okay.
That's the only tricky thing, is you have to be thinking about this before November 3rd, and that can be a little tough, but that's one of the reasons we're having these trainings. So you can start thinking about it now. You can apply for your absentee ballot. You can get it turned in, especially with issues with the mail right now, and just how inundated it's been. The more time, the better if you can submit your ballot early.
Yeah.
So that's the big thing to think about, but absentee ballots are a great alternative to going in person. So.
I have a question.
Yeah, of course, go ahead.
I believe that I got this answer when I inquired that my primary was done absentee by the mail, and that I was automatically signed up for the November 3rd. Seeing as how I don't know how the process went. I don't recall how the process went, but I applied for the mail-in, and it covered the primary and the November 3rd.
Awesome. Yeah, so if that's the case and you signed up for both, then you will get both, or you should have gotten the primary ballot closer to August 11th.
Right. And I did, and I'll get the November 3rd one, I'm hoping, in late October.
Yeah. Well, Zach had mentioned they're sending out the first couple waves of ballots in the next couple of weeks. So that'll be good. Well, that's awesome that you signed up. And it was really good that Minnesota had the option for people to sign up for both at once, because that saves you some time.
Yeah.
So to get your mail-in ballot, and it sounds like a lot of you have registered already, which is awesome. So some of you have already done some of these steps, which is great. But there are a couple of ways you can do it. The first and in a lot of ways easiest, if you do have the technology, is to apply online. So you will need some information that I have listed here. It's not too crazy complex, but you will need your home address, an ID number, and you can use either your driver's license, state ID, or the last 4 digits of your social security number. And importantly, and this is difficult for some folks, you do need an email address to verify it. So that's kind of the big constraint for online, is you do need to have all of those pieces of information. But if you aren't able to register for your absentee ballot online, there is a good opportunity to do it by paper through the mail. And that we have plenty of time, so it's a good time to do it is now and as soon as possible, but you can apply to get your absentee ballot through the paper application. And so I actually included a copy of that application. It is on, let me see what page. Included in your binder. I just got to figure out what page it's on. And so that you just have to fill out and then submit, and then you'll be registered without having to do anything online, which is kind of nice. Let's see. All right, so that application is on page 51 and 52 of your binder. So if you are interested in submitting the paper application, just pull it out of your binder, fill it out, pop it in an envelope, and mail it to your local elections office, and then you're good to go. So to walk through what it's like when you actually do get your absentee ballot, and this is starting on page 47 of your binder. You can see here, I took a picture. I thought very far ahead. I took a picture of the ballot that I received for our state primaries, because this is what it's going to look like when you get your ballot for the general election on November 3rd. The hard thing And, you know, my brain is always in like brain injury mode, right? Like, how does this work for folks with brain injury? This is kind of a mess. There are lots of pieces of paper, lots of text all over. I get that this can be really, really difficult, and that's okay. So one of the reasons that we're doing this today is so that this is familiar, and so you can pull out your binder and walk along with these steps while you're filling out your ballot to make sure that you get all the parts right. So you'll get a lot of stuff in the mail. You'll get your ballot, which, if you can see, is this top thing here. You'll get a tan ballot envelope where you get to hide your ballot after you're done submitting it. That's the tan envelope down in the bottom. You'll get a white signature envelope. That's kind of the tall one over on the right side. And you'll get the return envelope that's over here on the left, which is how you return it back to your election officials. Well, that's a lot of moving parts. So we're gonna walk through what happens and how you use them and how you fill it out in just a sec. The other couple of things that you will need is you will need a pen with black ink. So you cannot fill it out with pencil. That's not gonna work. You cannot fill it out with crayon. Cannot fill it out with, you know, some random dirt that you find in the ground. You have to use a black pen. I don't care how creative you get. So just make sure you have one around the time that you're going to get it, and make sure you fill it out with black pen. And then again, you're going to need that ID number. And so that can be either your driver's license, your Minnesota state ID, or the last 4 digits of your social security number. So just make sure that you have some form of ID ready to go, because they do want to verify that it's actually you who is voting. So those are kind of the pieces that you're going to get. And now we're going to walk through how to use them. So the very first thing you're going to do when you get your ballot using your black pen is vote. So there's going to be a list of the candidates. There's going to be a number of candidates who you can vote for. So it'll say like pick 1 or pick 3. And then you will fill in the bubble like those old Scantron tests in high school about who you want to vote for. And the good thing about this is it's a lot like what you do when you're at the actual polling place. So this feels kind of familiar. But make sure you fill in those bubbles completely. Make sure you're voting for the candidate that you want to represent you. And in our elections part 2, we are going to go over how to pick which candidate represents you and how to research that and how to go through it. And Zach will go over a lot of those details outside of the logistics about how to do candidate research.
Molly, could you back up this slide to the previous one, please?
Yep. And also, these are all the pieces that you'll get. So that first one where you'll fill in the bubbles, that's this ballot up at the top that says state partisan primary ballot, except yours is going to say general election ballot, and it'll have, you know, November 3rd instead of August 11th. Like, it'll have the details slightly different, but this is where you'll fill in those important bubbles.
Okay.
So the next thing you're going to do after you fill out all your bubbles on the ballot is you're going to seal it in the ballot envelope. So this is the tan one. And the reason why they have this envelope is because your ballot doesn't have any information about you, and the ballot envelope doesn't have any information about you. So that way your ballot is anonymous. That means that the people don't know, you know, they can't track who you're voting for. They can't track whose party you're voting for. The same way it would be in a polling place. You just put it in the box, it would suck it up and count your vote. You're kind of putting it in a box so that it doesn't have any of your personal information on it. So that tan ballot envelope, make sure that doesn't have anything written on it. Don't put your notes on that one. If you're gonna write notes down, put them on a different paper. But you'll seal up your ballot in that tan envelope. So then, this is when it gets kind of crazy. You put the tan envelope into the white signature envelope. So it's a little bit of envelope inception because we're going to put a lot of envelopes in other envelopes. But the signature one has a huge box that says signature, which is how you know it's the signature one. And this is where you do put your personal information. And it'll say clearly what you need to put and where. It'll have boxes, but you'll need to put your name and your address. You'll need to put your ID info. So that's your driver's license, your state ID, or the last 4 digits of your social security number. And then they have an oath on there that you're going to have to read and sign. And that oath is basically saying that you live where you say you live, you are over 18 at the time of the election, you are a U.S. citizen. It's pledging all of those things that you need to have to vote. And then importantly, and this is maybe one of the trickier parts, especially if you live alone, you will need to have a witness read and sign that oath as well. So if you voted in the primaries, I know a lot of election offices actually waived this requirement and didn't make you have a witness. So who here didn't have to have a witness sign if they voted absentee for the primaries? I'll raise my hand. I didn't have to have a witness sign mine. Yeah. So that I think was largely because of COVID, because they knew that not everyone has someone who can just hop over and sign their oath. But we're not sure, and we haven't heard yet whether the same will be true for the general election. So be ready just in case. Maybe talk to your neighbor, say, I'll sign yours if you sign mine. Have a plan for having someone be that witness. And basically they just have to say that you are who you say you are, that you filled out the ballot, that you are the one putting it in the envelope. But just so that you are ready in case they do require you to have a witness, make sure you have somebody in your head that you're thinking of who can do it. So step number 5, more envelope inception. So remember you have the ballot inside of the tan ballot envelope, and then you put the tan ballot envelope inside of the white signature envelope, and then you put the white signature envelope inside of the big return envelope. This is the last envelope in the series. So this one will have the return address. It will, say where it's going. It should be pre-labeled when it comes to you, so you won't have to worry about figuring out where it needs to go. And you'll seal that up, and then you have to either send it through the mail, so pop it in your mailbox and make sure the post office picks it up, or you can deliver it in person before 3 p.m. on election day. So if you're not super sure, if it's super close to the election and you're not sure if it's going to get there in time, you can go drop it off in person.
On number 6 here, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't see what it says. Your ballot must be postmarked by E something.
Okay. So yeah, your ballot must be postmarked by election day.
Okay.
So
Okay.
on or before election day to the address on the return envelope.
Okay. Thank you.
So basically, if you get it in the mail on or before November 3rd, it'll be counted. But that's not to say that you shouldn't have it in the mail way before then if you can, right? The more people we can do the more people we can have doing it early, a little bit easier, more likely that stuff doesn't fall through the cracks. And so I would really recommend trying to get it done before the election day proper if you can. But yeah, so the last step is just to get it back to the election office. And that's a little tricky, but you can either pop it in the mail or do it in person. And it just has to be either delivered in person before 3 p.m. or postmarked on or before election day. So that's kind of the major details behind, how we vote, when we vote, what are we doing when we have have a very different looking election year. One thing to note that I didn't put in the slides just because it's a lot of information all on one page is that you do still have all of the rights that we've talked about in previous years about voting with a disability. So polling places must be accessible. You can have someone help you vote if you want them to. There will be voting machines the same way there were in previous years at polling places. So you still have all of those same rights that you had pre-COVID. We are just strongly urging you, if you're able to vote absentee, just so that you're not putting yourself and those around you in danger by going to polling places. Though, of course, if that's the way you want to vote, you're totally allowed to vote in person on election day if that's your choice. But we want to make sure that you have the tools to vote no matter which way you choose. And even though, you know, some of the details surrounding absentee balloting are a little tricky, we want you to see it now so that you can navigate it with confidence and help those around you navigate it when it comes time to submit your ballot and vote absentee. The other thing to note is that Jeff, Zach, and I are not going away. So if you have questions, if you're struggling, if you get stuck trying to fill out your ballot, we can help you. Now we can't tell you who to vote for. Should be very clear. If you call me and you're like, Molly, should I vote for Trump or Joe Biden? I can't say a thing. But we can help you figure out, you know, which envelope goes in the other envelope. Where do I need to send it? When do I need to send it by? You know, my ballot didn't show up at my house. What do I do? Like, all of those questions are things we can help you with because we want you guys to vote, period. That's our end goal. And so as we go through this process together, even though it's a little different and even though it's weird, we want to be your partners in navigating this. So please, please, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions or need help, or if you know people who have questions or need help, because we're also happy to help them as well. So